The war in Ukraine has changed the world. And now we need to think about where this world is moving to, together. That's why MIM Business School is launching the nationwide educational project ReInforceUA, where the world's greatest minds will share their ideas and insights. And you will get their experience, change your perspective, and discover what changes should the business be ready for, before and after the victory. Every week on ReInforceUA.com.
Вячеслав Покатило від імені бізнес-школи МІМ Київ вітаю вас в проєкті ReInforceUA. Цей проєкт англомовний, і тому всім, кому потрібен переклад, прошу натиснути кнопочку Interpretation внизу вашого екрана. Dear colleagues, friends, both in Ukraine and worldwide, I'm Vyacheslav Pokatilo, and on behalf of MIM Kyiv Business School, welcome you on ReInforceUA project. This project was designed in order to inspire Ukrainian business community and bring most renowned intellectuals to share their opinions about what agenda we are meeting for in the future. The project was made possible due to the generous support of Bogdan Havrilishin Family Foundation, 50 Thinkers Organization, and three major business education associations, AACSB, AMBA, and AFMD. We are grateful for all donations you have made when registering the project, and remind that all collected money will be transferred to support temporarily displaced Ukrainian women who would like to start their own businesses. Before I shall give the floor and introduce you our guest today, I'd like to remind you that we are online, and at the end of the presentation, you will be able to ask questions. And for this purpose, I kindly ask you to use Q&A button rather than chat. And now I am honored to welcome Mr. Terence Mauri in our project. Terence Mauri is a founder of Hack Future Lab. A great title, a global think tank, and the author of bestsellers published in several languages. He's one of the most in-demand speakers who inspires leaders worldwide to thrive in the age of disruption. Terence Mauri has first-hand experience in business, growing a more than 100 million revenues organization as a director of Saatchi & Saatchi, where he advised leaders from iconic companies including Apple, Microsoft, Netflix, and Novartis. With this, I'm very pleased and honored to transfer the floor on the screen to you, Terence, and we are looking forward to learn how leaders, or what kind of leaders the future expects, and how we could become such leaders.
Thank you very much for the warm welcome. Hello, everybody. I hope you're well. And it's an absolute pleasure to join you today. I want to give you all the equivalent of a double espresso or a spiced pumpkin latte to shake up your thinking, ignite new perspectives, and say goodbye to the status quo. It's fair to say that over the last 3 years, everything changed. People changed, priorities changed, the way we work and live changed. Even my 7-year-old niece changed. I call her my CTO, not Chief Technology Officer, Child Technology Officer. Most families, no one. The central question I want to tackle today is, do you watch the world change around you? Or will you be the one searching for the change, driving the change, and turning the change into a tailwind for laser-like focus, strategic courage, and value creation? Today is the slowest it will ever be in our lifetime, and that's either terrifying or exciting, depending on your mindset. And I'm going to take you through a journey, and I want you to really think about the questions I asked today. Questions are the answer when you're operating at the edge of uncertainty, when volatility is high and complexity is high. Questions matter more than answers. So grab a pen and get ready. Today, I want to give you that equivalent of a double espresso and start with 5 big catalytic questions to plant a narrative in the here and now and get you thinking about, are you leading from the future or the past? If you think about it, if you stop for 4 minutes every day to think about new types of questions, new questions to old problems, new questions to new problems, that's 24 hours of new questions a year. Questions are like the golden key that can unlock the door and help you see the world differently, challenging old assumptions, old operating models, old ways of working that have gone off like yogurt in the fridge. So questions are the answer. What are the boldest questions you will ask this year? What questions do you want to be remembered for? Here are 5 big ones that we're going to address over the next 30 minutes. Number 1, what are your billion-dollar beliefs? Beliefs drive behaviors and behaviors drive mindsets and decisions. And so what are the big exponential beliefs that are driving you right now in terms of your business, your leadership, and the teams you manage as well? Question number 2, change used to happen as a breeze. Now it feels like a category 5 typhoon. How do you turn volatility into a tailwind, into a platform for laser-like focus, value creation, strategic courage, learning, and growth? Question 3 is a big question. We're suffering epidemic levels of overload, overwhelm, and burnout. In fact, research at Hack Future Lab shows that 83% of leaders globally are at risk of burnout. Over 93% of leaders say they spend too much time in bad meetings. Perhaps you can relate to that. And what that means is you have less cognitive bandwidth to focus on your highest value work. Question 4 is a big question. It's impossible to lead from the future. It's impossible to turn talk into action. It's impossible to prioritize effective resource allocation if you don't have a clear no strategy. What's your no strategy? When you have a no strategy, it's a simplifier. It's a shortcut to great decision making. It's a clarifier. It's a multiplier, and it's an energizer as well. So question 4, what do you say no to, or unlearn, or eliminate to go 10x wiser, or healthier, or more inclusive, or more sustainable? Question 5 is a big question. If we meet in 12 months' time for an espresso, and I hope we do, what will be your future success headlines that you want to share with me? Think about those future success headlines for a few moments. What would be the mindset shifts, the behavior shifts, the decision points that you would need to activate today with me in order to start creating, designing your boldest future success headlines? And think about the milestones and the timelines that are going to make that happen. Let's begin with the end in mind. So what are going to be your future success headlines? To sum up, these are 5 big catalytic questions that we're going to discuss and explore together over the next 30 minutes so that you leave this session with high clarity, new ways of thinking, and new ways of leading to energize your business and energize your teams for a challenging road ahead. People keep telling me that data is the new oil. I disagree. I think your attention is the new oil, and your attention spans are under attack. If you think about it, our attention spans have been blown up into millions of pixels. Attention is the new oil. Attention to winning the war for talent. Attention to upskilling and reskilling and cross-skilling. Attention to creating an inclusive and sustainable and resilient workforce. Attention to unlocking sustainable potential and capacity and productivity. Attention to growth, and attention to turning talk into action. The bad news, the challenge, the blind spot is that our attention spans are under attack. 65% of leaders say they spend too much time on shallow thinking and shallow leadership. That's low value, low impact, low contribution at the expense of deep leadership, deep thinking, deep focus, high value, high contribution, high relevancy. 83% of leaders say that 1 in 3 meetings is a bad meeting. And that has a significant financial cost. For 100 people, that's over €1 million lost in productivity when 1 meeting is a bad meeting in every 3 meetings. And so we need to focus on focus and pay attention to attention. If you think about it, leadership is about attention. It's about paying attention to shaping the future, paying attention to making strategic choices, paying attention to saying no so that you can focus and go big on context setting and direction setting and pace setting and talent setting. So what are you going to pay attention to today? Over the last 3 years, everything changed. We have what's called volatility on steroids. The economist Nouri Arabini describes it as moving from the great moderation to the great stagflation. Blurring of industry lines, economic and geopolitical uncertainty, a terrible war and invasion of Ukraine. Disruptive technologies. This week, we have the launch of ChatGPT-4, for example, shrinking of company and product lifespans, even job lifespans. Now, not taking a risk is a risk. Research at Hat Future Lab in partnership with MIT has identified a number of disruptors on the horizon that create risk, but also opportunity. 3 of the biggest are obviously the global financial crisis that we're experiencing right now. Just today, the market cap of Credit Suisse has dropped 96%. The stock price has dropped 96%. Silicon Valley Bank, Signature Bank. So we have systemic risk and systemic disruption in the system. We're obviously still recovering from a global pandemic and supply chain shocks as well. Deglobalization, debt, geopolitical rivalries around the world. And of course, we have the Russian invasion of Ukraine. But I want to say to you directly today, we always overestimate the risk of trying something new. We always overestimate the risk of trying something new. And we always underestimate the risk of standing still. Risk and reward travel in the same elevator. Risk and reward travel in the same elevator. And so today I want to really share with you stories, insights, and data of how to turn volatility into a platform for reimagination. If you think about it, everything starts as an act of imagination. But to sustain vitality for the long term, that requires reimagination, which I define as the curiosity to learn, the courage to unlearn, the clarity to focus, and the conviction to decide. Learning helps you evolve. Unlearning helps you keep up as the world evolves. And here we can see some interesting research from Hat Future Lab. The history of humanity is a history of disruption. Stone Age, Bronze Age, Iron Age, and now this age of AI and automation and robotics. 100,000 years ago, we harnessed fire, which led to language. And as you can see from this research, 175 years ago, we innovated on 3 big platforms, the telephone, automobile, electricity, that completely reimagined the nature of work and also the nature of value creation. They reshaped society and reshaped the way we work and why we work. Today, you stand at a new inflection point, 5 big converging technologies that will create potentially over $210 trillion of global equity market opportunity by 2030. It's blockchain, it's energy storage, it's automation and generative AI, it's DNA sequencing. And these will create new business models. Value is being redefined, competitive lines are being redrawn. Here's a scary truth. Your next biggest competitor could come from a completely different vertical to you in the next 5 years. This is the new meta, nothing to do with Facebook. This is where competitive lines are redrawn, value is being redefined, and companies are dying younger. But I want to reject this false constraint that disruption just happens to us. I think that we can turn disruption into a platform for growth, for resilience, and for future readiness. And you need to make a decision today. Leadership, it's a decision. And a key decision you need to think about is mastering the new logic of competition and the new logic of leadership. What do I mean by that? You're now competing on the rate and speed of learning and unlearning. You're competing on physical and digital or phygital. You're competing on imagination and return on intelligence, ROI, not just return on investment. We know that's an important metric, but return on intelligence. This is a new cognitive metric for a human-centric world. Imagine an operating environment where your people, your talent is enabled, cognitively enabled to solve the biggest problems that your customers face on the outside. Cognitively enabled. You're also competing on resiliency and anti-fragility, not just the ability to react, but the ability to anticipate and absorb shocks, supply chain shocks, for example. Here we can see a new meta study from Hat Future Lab looking at a number of bold behaviors, universal behaviors that you can think about and evaluate yourself against today. As a side note, some of the biggest regrets in our lives, when we get to the end of our lives, the regret of inaction always outnumbers the regret of action. I'll repeat that because it's a very important statement. The regrets of inaction outnumber the regrets of action. And two of the biggest regrets in our lives are boldness and connection. And so here we can see from a meta study looking at the financial sector that we need to go bold and we need to go big on a number of imperatives. Of course, strong balance sheet, strong financial fundamentals, revenue growth, cost controls, and smart capital allocation. We need to really think about investors' expectations of future growth, strong employee diversity. The research here is unequivocal. When you have a great balance between men and women, you're 2.x more likely to be innovative and over 3x more likely to make smarter decisions. Openness to new ideas and innovation DNA, the ability to learn fast and fail fast. And some really interesting three big insights that I want you to think about and take away. Number one, all of these organizations that are mastering the new logic of competition, from MasterCard and Visa to Block and PayPal and DBS, they have a high learning orientation, the curiosity to learn and the courage to unlearn. They act and learn at the speed of the customer. You're reporting into your customers and your customers are driving the change from the outside. Number two, they crush bureaucracy. What's your BMI? Not body mass index, bureaucratic mass index. Bureaucracy is like oil and water. It's an innovation killer and a performance killer. And even big organizations need to think about reducing their BMI score. Excess bureaucracy, too many meetings, too many protocols, too many processes that have gone off like yogurt in the fridge. So to recap, high learning orientation, crushing BMI, bureaucratic mass index. That means excess bureaucracy, learning and acting at the speed of the customer, and high speed decision-making. Here's an important point. You can't explore a new world with an old map. Competitive lines are being redrawn, and we need to really rethink and reimagine not just why we do business, but how we do business. So what's the way forward? I wanted to plant a narrative to really present this idea that where we have volatility on steroids, blurring of industry lines, economic and geopolitical uncertainty, disruptive technologies, and shrinking of company and product lifespans, even job lifespans. However, it is possible to turn disruption into a tailwind. I recently spent some time working with PayPal, and they've generated 26x the number of patents as a 150-year-old Goldman Sachs. They have this new leadership DNA, future readiness DNA. What I mean by that is exploiting network effects, speed of scale, speed of innovation, and speed of decision-making. They also go big on velocity, visionary capital, and vertical integration. So what's the way forward? What can you do today to start really turning uncertainty into action, turning volatility into opportunity? Well, first of all, I want to share new research with you on the power of a bold DNA. Fear is always less risky than bold, but bold, if you think about it, bold is less risky than a weak strategy or weak leadership. And what I mean by bold is if you think about anybody in your life, that you admire, you respect, the chances are that they've shown a bold DNA. The curiosity to learn, the curiosity to think 10x, not 10%, the courage to unlearn. Remember, elimination is one of the finest forms of optimization, letting go of things so that you have more cognitive bandwidth to focus on higher value work and purpose-driven work. And we can see here some big data on bold DNA, 2.6x more likely to exceed financial targets when you have a bold culture, a culture that embraces ideas, that challenges the status quo, not rejects ideas that challenge the status quo. 6.7x more likely to adapt to change, adaptability being a key source of future readiness and creative resilience. 7.7x more likely to innovate effectively and learn at the speed of the customer. I saw a recent example of this in action, a concrete practical example of this, working with 100-year-old IKEA. And because of the speed of change, because of the extreme volatility, because we have black swans and gray rhinos and green swan events, so climate risk, at IKEA, what the leadership team have decided is to ditch forecasts and ditch annual budgets. It's quite a radical move because we're addicted to doing things the always done ways, even when they no longer perform or function or serve our purpose. So the leadership team at IKEA recently have decided to not do forecasts or budgets anymore. They've had the humility to accept that the environment is so unpredictable that it's smarter to think about scenarios and turn those scenarios into insights and decisions. And I want to give you a call to action today. As I share this research and these insights and these stories and these practical examples with you, 1, do you watch carefully? 2, do they inform your decision-making, your strategy, your leadership? Or 3, do you need to take action today? I also want you to think about 3 timelines. Number 1, do you look at probable? 2, possible, and 3, plausible. I want to say to you directly that one of the biggest blind spots we have as leaders and as humans is the tragedy of the horizon. What's the tragedy of the horizon? Recently, I was speaking in Denmark at a Deloitte conference, and I met Mark Carney, the former central bank governor of the Bank of England. And he spoke about a really powerful pain point, a blind spot that gets in the way of us leading from the future. It's called the tragedy of the horizon. And what it means is we as humans, we as business people, as leaders, we prioritize the short-term results over long-term concerns. We prioritize short-term thinking over long-term thinking. And you might be able to relate to that. And of course, when you think about central banks and the way that we decide interest rates and the way that organizations project scenarios, most organizations only look a couple of months or a couple of years out at the maximum. The tragedy of the horizon means that we get trapped in short-term thinking and we end up leading from the past rather than the future. What do I mean by that? Well, when you operate in a predictable environment, when volatility is low, when probables are low, you can execute a repeatable, viable business model. It's the always done ways, and that can serve well in a predictable, safe environment. Of course, we know those times have changed, and we're now operating in an environment where it's described as predictably unpredictable, perma-crisis, poly-crisis, shocks upon shocks. And so to lead from the future, you need to think about 3 steps. 1, do you have an aligned point of view about the big trends, the big inflection points that are going to impact your business over the next 3, 5, and 10 years? Number 2, are you adapting the core of what you do, the way you lead, your business model, your growth engines, to embrace the future and turn it into value creation? That includes adapting to new regulations, adapting to your competition, and having the courage to not just execute for today, but reimagine and transform for tomorrow. Because these are really relentless demands on your attention and your leadership bandwidth. We spend most of our time executing today, and our blind spot is transforming for tomorrow. Finally, number 3 is about activation, light speed activation. And here we have a story and a practical example from Ørsted. Ørsted is an organization that has been named the boldest transformation journey on the planet. 10 years ago, Ørsted was known as DONG, the Danish oil natural gas company, and it made its money from oil and gas. 10 years ago, the leadership team had an existential crisis. They thought ahead. They jumped into the future, and they thought about the big meta trends that are going to reimagine the way that we lead our lives and our businesses. That includes digitization, the sustainability drive, platformization, and so on. Excuse me for 1 second. I have to pause. We have a technical issue.
We can hear you, we can see you, it's okay, but could you please speak a little bit slowly?
Yes, of course. Can you see my slide?
Yes.
Okay, great. So Ørsted started 10 years ago, and it was known as the Danish oil natural gas company. And its business model was based around black being the money. So making money from oil and gas. And they had an existential crisis. They looked ahead. They did a number of future casting exercises where you really transport yourself into the future, 3, 5, 10, 15 years ahead. And you look back, you lead from the future, and you say, what are the big trends? What are the big inflection points that are going to impact society and the way we work and the way we live our lives? And of course, we know some of the big trends that are impacting every organization on the planet include the energy transition, which has accelerated, I think, because of the invasion of Ukraine. In fact, this week we have the EU announcing its Net Zero Industry Act in response to the US Inflation Reduction Act. We have the High Seas Treaty, which came out a couple of weeks ago, which will move from protecting 1% of seawater to 30% over the next 10 years. We also have the Digital Services Act and the Digital Markets Act in the EU. We have all of these big trends that are impacting organizations being driven by this number 1 trend, which is the sustainability agenda and the idea that we can still be competitive. We can still make a difference. We can still be profitable, but do the right thing, prioritizing the planet and not just profit. And so for Ørsted, they changed their name from DONG, a Danish oil national gas company, to Ørsted. And Ørsted is named after the electromagnetic scientist Ørsted from the 18th century. And over the last 10 years, they've committed to a bold transformation journey. And it's not just about digital. It's not just about growth. It's also about culture and mindset. And the point I want to make is, transformations fail because of most transformations don't fail because of technology, okay? Most transformations fail because of sociology and psychology. And I think the future favors the bold, the future favors the fearless, the future favors the most fluid, the most flexible, and the most focused on acting at the speed of the customer and turning mega trends, sustainability, platformization, automation, into milestones. Today, Ørsted, 10 years later or 120 months later, Ørsted has a market cap of over 60 billion euros and is the world's largest wind farm operator. There are 3 big concrete lessons for you to think about today. You might be running a small business. You might be running a big business, privately held, publicly held. But there are 3 lessons that are universal to all of you. 3 questions for you to think about to lead from the future, not the past. Number 1, what new products or services or platforms, ways of working have you introduced in the last 18 months? And the key metric is revenue outside of the core. So what new products, platforms, businesses have you launched? And the key metric is revenue outside of the core. Question number 2, how have we adapted our core to embrace new regulations, new disruptions, and to turn those into tailwinds for future readiness and resilience? Question number 3, financial impact. Have we gone big on revenue growth, cost controls, and capital allocation? Have we also gone big on high execution certainty rather than low execution certainty? Remember, the default for every organization is to lead from the past, especially when you're habituated to operating in a predictable, highly probable environment. It takes courage, humility, and curiosity to want to lead from the future. It means we need to go big on urgency, ambition, and courage. So this is a great story of one of the boldest transformations we've ever experienced. And it's not just about transformation, it's also about mindset and a collective mindset. I want to square the circle. My goal today was to give you the equivalent of a double espresso, to shake up your thinking, to get you thinking differently, asking new questions to old problems and new questions to new problems. I think the biggest risk today, the biggest source of turbulence today, is not volatility itself. I think the biggest threat for every business on the planet is acting with yesterday's logic, acting with yesterday's thinking, acting with yesterday's leadership. Here are 4 actions for you to think about today to lead from the future, not the past. Number 1, you are now operating in a forever beta world. What I mean by that is perpetual change, executing for today, but also transforming for tomorrow. And this means you need to make a decision to lead and embrace perpetual learning, relearning, and unlearning. Globally, there's over $41 trillion of enterprise value at risk, but it creates risk and opportunity. Number 2, do you have high execution certainty in your businesses or low execution certainty? My research at Hat Future Lab has shown that only 1 in 4 leaders can name 5 strategic priorities of their company. That creates a big problem because it means there's no alignment, there's no collective focus on the future, and it means that you're less likely to turn rhetoric into reality. To go big on high execution certainty, you need to really activate a purpose and to bring it to life in a relevant way, vertically and horizontally across your business. Just a couple of days ago, I got invited to speak at one of America's biggest credit card companies, Capital One, and they've committed to a purpose activation narrative for 2023. And the research is really powerful here. Only 1 in 4 workers knows what their job purpose is. When you have high levels of purpose, not just company purpose, but job purpose, it's an energizer, it's a multiplier, but also your return on equity is likely to be much higher, 13.1% compared to 3.4% for non-purpose driven companies. So forever beta world, are you embracing, learning, and transforming for a forever beta world, a world of renewal and a world of reinvention? Number 2, do you have high execution certainty, really going big on laser-like focus to turn decisions into action? Number 3, one of the best ways to beat disruption, to beat volatility, to outpace change is to have a race to reskill strategy. According to the World Economic Forum, over 1 billion people, about a third of the global workforce, will need to fundamentally be reskilled or upskilled or cross-skilled over the next 5 years. Question for you to think about. What's your reskill strategy? What are you doing within your organizations to go big on workforce agility, talent marketplaces, for example, work pixelization? We have over $7 trillion lost in productivity, quiet quitting from losing the war for talent. And we need to scale curiosity over conformity. Most cultures are cultures of conformity. They protect the status quo. They reject ideas that challenge it. You need to think about your culture as a culture of curiosity, which embraces ideas that challenge the status quo and is a source of future readiness. That's number 3. Number 4 then is a big one, BMI. Do you remember what it stands for? Not body mass index, bureaucratic mass index. This means, I define this as the number of excess, unnecessary forms of bureaucracy. I'll give you some examples. The US tax code has gone from 40,000 words to 4 million words in the last 10 years. We have tens of thousands of different types of job titles, which create confusion. For example, I recently came across head of uncertainty, director of disruption, and distraction prevention coach. Imagine that. BMI is a tax on humanity. It's a tax on future potential as well. $17 trillion a year is lost globally from excess BMI. And so an action for you to think about today is, what is your BMI in your team and your business? Is it over 70%, for example? A great tool to check out, and you'll get this resource at the end of my talk, is humanocracy.com/BMI, humanocracy.com/BMI, which can help you identify objectively, calculate your BMI score for your team, your business, and your industry. These are 4 imperatives for you to think about today. How do you thrive in a forever beta world? Do you have high execution certainty or low execution certainty? Are you winning the race to reskill or leaving it to chance? And number 4, what's your strategy for reducing BMI in your business? The biggest risk is not taking a risk. Where do you go from here then? I want to draw a red line and square the circle. At the beginning of this conversation, I gave you an action, a call to action. If we meet in 12 months' time for an espresso somewhere around the world, what will be your future success headlines for 2023? What will be the mindset shifts? What will be the key decisions that you will make to activate those future success headlines with your teams? Don't leave it to chance. Now is the moment. 3 questions to get you started on that journey of activation today. Number 1, where should you be aspiring to go 10x bolder or wiser or more sustainable over the next 12 months? Number 2, what are some of the long-held assumptions or opinions or viewpoints about your business, your industry, and your operating environment? And do they need to be reset or even reimagined? Question 3, what's your no strategy? What do you need to say no to be able to focus on your top priorities, to be able to protect your day, to be able to make things happen, and to be able to lead from the future, not the past? Now, I want to share with you a final story of resilience, of inspiration in this difficult time for everybody, especially you and your families in Ukraine. Say hello to Georgina Harwood. She's just celebrated her 100th birthday, born in 1923. Think about that year for a few moments. Not a great year to be born. After the First World War, we had the Great Depression, the Spanish flu, which killed over 50 million people. Georgina's dream was to always study English literature at university, but the odds were against her. She was a woman born in 1923. Very difficult to go to university as a woman in 1923. She had 5 children and 12 grandchildren. But you know, when you choose bold, when you choose courage over comfort, it's unstoppable. And at the age of 83, she had a family meeting. And she said to the family, I want to study English literature at university. The family thought she was crazy. And they said, look, please don't apply to university. But she was very determined, and she applied to university at the age of 83. And she thought she might get rejected. About 2 months later, she got an acceptance letter. And when she graduated, she was twice as old as the professor. You would think this would be the end of the story. But once you activate purpose, once you activate your why, once you really start turning your energy into action, it's unstoppable. And at the age of 88, she had another family meeting and she decided that she wanted to study a master's program at university. And she completed the master's. And when she graduated, she had a terrible stroke, but she survived. She had a Sisu spirit. Sisu is a Finnish word, and it means Viking spirit. And I think we've seen that more than ever with Ukrainians all around the world in the last 2 years. At the age of 100, she had a family meeting. You can imagine the anxiety levels of the family when she had this meeting. And she announced to the family that she wanted to do a parachute jump. And here's a photograph of her about to take off in a plane at 15,000 feet to do a parachute jump, tandem dive, which she did twice. Hands up if you've done a parachute jump. It takes Sisu spirit, courage to be able to do that. And when I interviewed her, I said to her, what is your secret sauce? What is your secret? And she said, choose courage over comfort. Choose curiosity over conformity. Choose resilience over fear. And don't give up. I think it's a great way to end this conversation today. If there's one final call to action, make this the year of radical change. Make this the year of courage. Why? Learning is never finished. Transformation is never finished. The job is never finished. Make this a year of courage of heart and boldness of ideas. I will leave you with the words of the Nobel laureate, Marie Curie. She said, in life, nothing is to be feared, only understood. And the more you understand, the less you will fear. Take care, everyone.
On behalf of everybody, thank you very much. This was very insightful. We still have some time for a couple of questions, there are a lot in my head. Let's start with simple. You mentioned burnout and you mentioned bureaucracy. BMI. What is the reason for this burnout currently? Everybody is speaking of, in your opinion, and also why there are so many meetings. Do this somehow connected to each other? I mean, they're correlated, and if it's correct that bureaucratic organizations have more meeting or less meeting, and okay, several thoughts and opinions are very useful. I believe it will be very helpful to our people.
It's a really important question. And look, we have Neolithic brains. Our brains have not got faster. If you look at the processing power of a chip, it's increased over 1 trillion times since the 1950s. The processing power of our brain has not. It's stayed the same. If you look at the work of Tristan Harris, he's a former Google engineer. You know, he talks about a cognitive shock, an emotional shock. 8 hours is only 480 minutes. We're trying to do thousands of minutes of commitments, demands, priorities in 480 minutes. We're always on. We're trying to compete with the speed of technology, and that's creating a wisdom gap. The speed of technology is going exponential, and our brains are staying the same. And that's creating a wisdom gap. And so I'll give you an example. I recently did some work with HSBC, and they have their BMI score is around 93%. So for example, what that means is they have too many meetings, they still require lots of manual physical sign-offs. They're still doing a lot of physical work that could be automated or augmented. And if you look at the last 200 years, we're still doing a lot of working practices that started 200 years ago from the Industrial Revolution. We have not updated them for the 21st century. And it's true. If you have a high BMI, bureaucratic mass index, it's likely that you're spending more time in meetings as well. Technology has created the illusion of productivity. It's created the illusion of productivity. And we're addicted to our devices. And of course, the devices are designed to make you addicted. I spent some time with a startup in Silicon Valley. It's called Dopamine Labs. It has over $3 billion market capitalization, and its clients include Google, Amazon, TikTok, Instagram. and so on. And it's designed to keep you locked on the screen. So we have technology going exponential, but we still have these ancient brains and ancient bodies, and we're trying to go faster and faster rather than being more wisdom. We're becoming automated as human beings. I think there's a couple of strategies. We need to stop. We need to unplug. We need to have digital detox. We need to spend more time with our family. We need to go for a walk in nature. We need to really think about our day and our commitments and the difference between deep work or high value work, focused work, and shallow work or work that is busy but not high value. Some great thinkers out there that I recommend: Cal Newport from MIT. He writes a lot about productivity. He writes a lot about shallow thinking, shallow work versus deep work. So Professor Cal Newport. Also, Tristan Harris from Google. He's got a great resource, the Center for Humane Technology, the latest research on the negative impacts of technology on our cognitive abilities. These would be two recommendations to think.
Oh, great. There is indeed a lot of publications and work about this, addiction and cognitive biases and troubles with new technologies. And I appreciate you mentioned this. Well, so if I would extrapolate a little bit and think in the future, people should, let's say, work in the type we work now less in the future. So to work differently. Why then, in your opinion, it happens that after the COVID, with all this, working from the home and, at least technically a possibility for the people to spend more time in family, faced suddenly such an opposition from current leaders in the organization? Not all of them, of course, but some famous leaders became even more famous, opposing continuing this practice and forcing people back to offices. Are they wrong?
Yes.
What is the reason behind?
Look, if we go back to, the economist Keynes, he predicted over 100 years ago that we would have a 4-hour week in the 21st century. But of course, the illusion, this false connection that technology equals more productivity is actually not true. You can see that the productivity levels of most countries is going down, not up. There's a productivity gap in many countries. And we have this addiction to almost vanity productivity. So if you look at Elon Musk, for example, it's almost like a badge of honor to be busy, to only sleep 3 hours. And this is a dangerous strategy because, of course, if we're lucky, we live for about 80 years of age. We need to sleep. We still don't know why we need to sleep, but we need to sleep for at least 8 or 9 hours. And if we're lucky, we live for 80 years on average, some more, some less. But 80 years is just 960 months, and it goes very quickly. And technology is speeding that up. The pandemic was an accelerant for many things, accelerant for new business models, accelerant for remote work and remote shopping, home shopping, accelerant for new ways of working, hybrid, for example, hybridization. But it was also an accelerant for work intensity. So some interesting research from Gillian Tett, a journalist at the Financial Times. She's done a lot of research on work intensity. And this is the idea that when you think about your week, how much of it is highly intense, highly deadline driven. And for many people, it's the norm. Work intensity, high work intensity has become normalized. And so what we're trying to do, because of technology, is now we're doing Zoom meetings and face meetings. We're doing both. And so we're spending more and more time in meetings, more and more time with BMI. And this has a big impact on our happiness, our well-being. When I was with Capital One, a client that I work with recently, again, they spend twice as much in meetings that they did before the pandemic. You pay a high cognitive tax. What I mean by that is like paying a tax on money. When you spend more and more time just on the technology, you have less bandwidth, less time to focus on strategic thinking, creativity, thinking in the shoes of your customers, innovating. We just become automated. And so it's a big universal challenge, which is a question for us to think about. How do we make well-being, how do we make focus a non-negotiable in our personal lives and our professional lives?
Thank you. When mentioning and speaking of technology, currently there's more and more thinking of something digital related to gadget, etc. I'd like to refer to a very old technology, and you mentioned one of it, mentioning about oil and substitution oil by not data, but by attention. And also mentioned an example of the oil company which turned from getting money from oil to wind and green power. Yes. But today, the classical oil company are on the top.
Yes.
They are on the top. What are the reasons for them, for their leaders, for the employees, etc., to change, to listen to what all kind of your recommendations?
We could see here
how would this challenge. What is the future?
Look, I mean, there's a really interesting graph that I saw recently of the market cap of ExxonMobil, one of the world's biggest oil companies, is now like that, and the market cap of Zoom, a new technology company, is like that. And during the pandemic, it was the opposite. Zoom was here, ExxonMobil was here. Look, we've seen over the last 18 months, and of course, the invasion of Ukraine has been a major factor in this, which oil became the new money again. The pressures and the challenges of an energy crisis have been, of advantage, been of a benefit to the oil and gas companies. We've also had to, countries around the world have had to pivot to new sources of energy, which has obviously increased the value of oil and gas. There are, of course, certain countries in the world as well that have a strategic imperative to sustain high oil and gas prices, because they're not diversifying as fast as they can, but also that is their main source of income. It's a very complex question to answer. And I think we're at a unique period in our history where, inversely, yes, oil and gas companies' market caps are at highest levels right now, but what's happening in terms of geopolitical risks, the war in Ukraine, etc., has actually accelerated the green transition as well. We're actually seeing, I think, acceleration of transformation around the world that would not have happened. So I think there is an upside to this argument and a downside. I think we are seeing acceleration of green transitions for sure, but also we should not take anything for granted. Sustainability is an existential crisis right now. There is a ticking time bomb right out there. But we're seeing new regulations, new laws coming into place that are going to continue to make it less and less competitive from a shareholder perspective to invest in oil and gas, I believe, over the next 5 to 10 years.
Okay, we need to live longer, as the lady from your example. Vladislav Karatkov asked related questions about, let's say, new technology. I mean, all new technologies requires, and he meant these green technologies, requires creating a network, some kind of a support of the society, of business, financial, etc., etc. How long it'll take to build such a network for green technologies, in your opinion?
The key word here is ecosystems, ecosystems of trust, ecosystems of excellence. The research coming out of Hack Future Lab shows that over the next 5 years, networks and ecosystems can create a market potential globally of over $7 trillion in terms of market opportunities. I believe the infrastructures are still are there to a degree. What we're lacking is political willpower. What we're lacking is political courage and political moral duty to make this happen. And so, you know, I spoke about Mark Carney, for example, who has set up an organization called GFANZ, the Glasgow Financial Alliance for Net Zero. And one of the big challenges right now is that this green transition has become politicized. For example, we have woke capitalism now. We have the Republicans in the US actually punishing organizations that are looking to invest in ESG. This is a dangerous path to follow. So the answer is, we don't know exactly what the timeline is. The challenge is we could have what I call a great relapse because of the politicization of the green agenda. It could take longer than it needs to.
It seems that everything is politicized at the moment very much.
Yes,
let me touch the question just now. You mentioned correctly, and we also teach in business school the importance of having the purpose of the organizations before starting to make profit and return on investment and all other things, which I learned a little bit later on during the study. What came to me is the following. Currently, one of the political, let's say, some kind of a disruption related with American, China, and Chinese approach to make a purpose even on a higher level than businesses, on a higher level than organizations, on a top level of the country. I would try not to mention another example closer to our current situation, just to refer to China, and its very nice purpose for the common prosperity, so creating a common things. What's wrong, in your opinion, with this kind of purpose, which everybody would gladly share?
Purpose is, people speaking about purpose and using purpose words and saying they have a purpose is easy. And that's the problem. We have too much rhetoric and not enough reality. For example, Theranos, the biotech company, had a very clear purpose, a very impressive purpose, aspirational. FTX, the cryptocurrency, had a really impressive purpose, inclusivity and growth. McKinsey opioid scandal, really strong purpose. VW Gulf emissions. And I can keep saying numbers after numbers. 10 out of 15 industries have suffered major purpose trust breaches over the last 3 years. It's not our imagination. More and more companies are operating at the edge of ethics, at the edge of purpose. And so I think there's a real danger of this great relapse where actually the old rules still apply. Although we talk more and more about stakeholder capitalism, inclusivity, and growth, the old ways of thinking have not changed as much as we think. And that's why we cannot take anything for granted. And this is a long-term repetitive campaign. What I am seeing, which I think is a positive moment, is the rise of activist investors who are winning proxy battles on boards to force companies to change their strategies. For example, Engine One, an investor, activist investor, won a proxy battle with ExxonMobil to drive a new type of green agenda. We have proxy battles right now with Salesforce, with Disney. So we have a new generation of millennial-driven activist investors, billions of capital looking to attack and win proxy battles to force the change and force the new agenda. But this isn't going to change overnight. This is a long-term campaign.
It's worthwhile live learn. That's the clear consequence or recommendation. Would you give other recommendations how to live in a full life and learn based on your own experience of your own life? How you do it for yourself?
Look, for me, I mean, I have an Italian heritage. So my father is from Italy. although I grew up in the UK. And you know, sometimes that makes my life complicated when I go back to Italy for the first 24 hours. I'm English. I try and get a coffee. It takes very long because I'm forming a queue. But then after the 24 hours, my hand starts to move. I get the coffee quickly. But I think when I go to Italy, it reminds me of, you know, family, connection, you know, being together, supporting each other, caring about each other. I'll give you an example. I remember many years ago, I was sitting on a bench looking out to sea, looking at the sea in Italy, just by myself. And after about 5 minutes, I felt this on my shoulder, a hand on my shoulder. And I looked around and it was my uncle. And he said to me, "Are you depressed? Are you lonely?" I said, "No, I'm just you know, spending some time by myself." But in Italy, this was like, wow, you know, because the Italians are so connected. And I think there's a reason, there's a correlation, the connection, the care, the family, the loyalty. That's, you know, and of course, the food and the Mediterranean diet and the warmth. That's why they live to a very old age, because, you know, the loneliness is lower. In the UK and America, the loneliness is very high. People in their 60s and 70s and 80s, sometimes they don't see anybody or speak to anybody for weeks. I had an interesting conversation recently with Professor Linda Grattan at London Business School, and her data shows that over 300 million people on the planet have zero friends. We're more connected than ever, but more isolated than ever. So my learning is friends, family, connection, you know, and enjoying those times together is absolutely key. Of course, we can talk about doing a bit of fitness as well, but I think it's, you know, it's your looking after your heart with your friends, your family, and, you know, being in love. Love is important.
That's a great. I just can't but mention that your idea with double espresso until you explained that you are from Italy looked like you are going to disrupt the Starbucks, but now everything is online. And your last let's say claim is very important. And we are out of time at the moment, but I very much appreciate.
Thank you so much.
Your insightful presentation, thoughts, and also very, let's say, answers which produces even more thoughts, in my opinion, than during the presentation. Probably some of our audience.
Thank you for inviting me, and you know, my thoughts are with you, all of you, and your families. And thank you
very much. Thank you very much for your time.
Yes.
For the time, we appreciate, and looking forward for possibility to welcome you physically with double espresso. We have also fairly good one in Kyiv available, and with a lecture on our audience. And with this, I would like to remind our participants that this lecture is recorded. It will be available after all on this site and on other platforms. And I invite you to come back and to listen again, because Mauri spoke a little bit fast and very concentrated on various thoughts. So it was worthwhile repeating, thinking, and to announce that our project is continuing, and our next session will be on 29th of March in 2 weeks and 6 p.m. on Wednesday. And our guest will be Deborah Rowland. And she's a renowned expert in leadership and change, and we will continue to speak about challenges of leaderships for the future. With this, thank you very much again, Mr. Mauri, and all the participants. Good luck. Have a nice evening, or morning, or day, wherever you are. Slava Ukraini. And you know, we need to win. Otherwise, oil companies will keep dominating on the earth. Goodbye.
The war in Ukraine has changed the world, and now we need to think about where this world is moving to, together. That's why MIM Business School is launching the nationwide educational project ReInforceUA, where the world's greatest minds will share their ideas and insights. And you will get their experience, change your perspective, and discover what changes should the business be ready for, before and after the victory. Every week on ReInforceUA.com.